I'm Sandy Towell. I'm running for Division 1 in the South Burnett Regional Council Elections on March 19. I came to this area 11 years ago with my husband Ross and my grandson Ben, and we've just absolutely loved the area. We fell in love with it, we bought property here, we've invested in it, and we've gotten very, very involved in the area. I come from a large family and originally came from a small country town, but lived most of my life in Brisbane. I've always had a burn to return to the country, and this place just felt like home. My family has come along with me over the years, so my son, my daughter, my sister, my brother, my parents were already here. So it's just an indication of the love that we have for this area, that we've been able to bring our whole family together. I now have 2 grandchildren here. I also have 4 children of my own, and I adopted 2 as young teenagers, and they've given me 16 beautiful grandchildren and 1 absolutely adorable great-grandson. Family is very important to me, but at the basis of everything that I do is community. My entire life has been spent working for the community in some way, shape or form, and that's my passion. I've been a passionate advocate for this area for a very long time. I've been involved in a range of voluntary organisations and activities, and I believe this is the next step for me. I can do more if I get into council. Look, I fully agree that we need an economic stimulus and we need more employment in the area, but I don't believe it should be at all costs. Once we start bringing a mine that close to town, we change the livability of the area, and the livability of the area is something that's very important to most of us. Also, once we start to tap into underground aquifers, that could come at the cost of our rural industries. So for me at this time, I'm not fully convinced that the mine is the right thing for us. I believe if we can introduce an economic driver to each of the larger towns, that will stimulate the economy and give more employment opportunities. To do that, we need to think outside the square. We need to be open to new and innovative ideas, and sometimes things that come out of left field. But also with those businesses that are already here, we need to be looking at how we can remove some of the blocks to their development and prosperity. So council has a role to play there in minimising some of those barriers to development and small businesses. As I've said, I believe one of the solutions is having an economic driver in each town. But also another solution is that we need to remove the barriers for bringing development and growth to the area. Too many times we've heard that a specific industry was going to come in, but it was just too hard to jump through all the hoops. So we need to get rid of some of that. We have a fantastic potential for tourism. We need to advocate for that, get around and start promoting the South Burnett. I actually believe that residents have a role to play there as well. They should be talking up their area. So if we can empower the local community when they travel to say what a wonderful area it is, that's only going to benefit us. But as a council, we need to think long and hard about what we want to come into the area and how we're going to make it happen. I've got a lot of contacts. I've worked in a national industry that had 9,600 small business outlets. Through that, I've developed a whole range of networks of people, and I would be tapping into those networks as well. What brought us to this area 11 years ago was the laid-back, relaxed country lifestyle. The history and the culture were an added bonus. We just absolutely love the fact that you could walk down the street and chat to people that you've never seen before, never known before. People were just incredibly friendly. I've brought to Nanango some national conferences, and the feedback that I've had from those people that have come from right across Australia to those is the very same thing. that it is such a lovely, friendly area. Yes, unfortunately, there are negatives to this area. The shrinking economy has made people fight for business, fight for every dollar. We've got a poor community, so they're struggling to make ends meet all of the time, and this creates a little bit of a negativity. We see in my work with the charities, we see people who are struggling all the time, and there aren't that many services there. So as far as my contribution is concerned, would be, once again, stimulating the economy, getting more employment into the town. If we can have a thriving business community, that vibrancy rubs off on the community. There's not such a stress and struggle to make ends meet. So I do believe that that's the bottom line for it. If we can get the businesses to thrive, the town will thrive, the community will be totally uplifted and will be more involved, and it will be a lovelier place to live. Well, the short answer to that would be, as soon as I get into council. I will be an advocate for good, reliable roadworks and maintenance schedules. Some roads will have to be prioritised, and this may be one of them, and I will certainly look into that. I understand that there are financial and safety reasons why the weir has locked off at this stage. I don't know if there are other concerns to be considered, but I really believe that we need to invest in tourism in this area, but we need to do it within a responsible budget. So I would be open to finding out more about this option, and if it's financially viable to make that change, then I'm all for it. We need to think about what it is that attracts people to an area. It's usually an event, some sort of environmental issue, some sort of attraction, okay? We also need to then identify who are the groups that have the money that they can spend in the area, and we focus on those. Perhaps it's an option of making the area motorbike friendly. There are lots of motorbike clubs out there who will spend the weekend coming up, doing tours, perhaps going to the wineries, to the historic, the museums, those sorts of landmarks, or just lapping up the Serenity. We need to do whatever we can to encourage visitors to this area. But once again, as a community, we all have a role to play. We are all tourism ambassadors. So my job is to make sure that the local people also pick up the banner there, and they promote the South Burnett as well. This is an easy question to answer because I've done it already. In my travels interstate, whenever I get in a taxi cab, I would talk to people about the area, and I would say to them, you must see the wine trail, you must visit the wine trail. The ration shed at Cherbourg, the Mergen Dairy Museum. Oh, you've just got to come along to the Nanango Country Muster or the Wine and Food Festival. There's so many, it's hard to pick 5, but they probably would be my top 5. I'm aware that there are crimes committed in the area, and although it's a policing issue, it's also a council issue in that council can provide safe parks, safe public places through looking at reducing hiding places, making it more accessible, more visible, making sure that there's good lighting there. As a business owner, we've experienced having our shop front windows smashed in by young people. We actually got involved in their recovery, I guess, and that was a big learning curve for us as to why those kids were out there doing that sort of stuff in the middle of the night, and also it was a big learning curve for them, for us to be able to say, listen, I understand, but it's not acceptable, but I'm still prepared to help you out. So we've personally experienced it and done something about it, but as a council I think we have a role to play in making sure that our public spaces are safe. Most definitely it does have an illicit drug problem, and working in the charity sector, I have seen the end results of this. We've had people coming in, they can't afford food, they can't afford water, they haven't got a car to run, they're homeless, domestic violence, all of those sorts of issues stem from that drug problem. Unfortunately, what I've also discovered is that places like the Maryborough Correctional Facility, when they release inmates, they give them a list of places that they can go to where there is apparently good support and housing, and Nanango's on the top of that list. We need to get our name off that list. The top three on that list are Nanango, Gympie and Hervey Bay, and coincidentally each of those areas has a very high drug crime rate. So we've got to get our name off that list. We can't deal with any more coming into the area. We are tapped out now. Our services are tapped out, and we need to support them more. There is so much that we can do as far as education and the community. Once again, I know I keep saying community, but we all have a role to work together in this. So many times I've heard people say, yes, I know there's a drug lab there, and yet do they report that to the police? So we need to make it easier for them to get that information across and let people know we don't want this in our community. Yes, we certainly do have a problem with domestic violence, and one of the issues that we do face in this region is that there is no safe place for people to go, for the victims and their families to go. So to get out of that situation, they have to leave the area. Our support services are doing a fantastic job with limited resources. We need to be able to support the supporters. But culturally, once again, as a community, we need to say, no, it's not acceptable, and we need to step in and stop this from happening. As a council, we need to promote that we do not accept violence. And I'm not just talking about violence against women, I'm talking about violence against women, men and children. It happens everywhere. We need to change the culture of our community. We need to change the thinking that it's okay to physically or mentally abuse people. It is not okay, and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that this is stamped out in our area. I do not want ratepayers funding a private hospital. I believe that this community deserves a private hospital and has a great need for a private hospital. I don't believe that it should be run by council. There's a reason why this is the only council in Australia that owns its own private hospital. Now, I feel that the new incoming council has been put in a position where they have to do the best that they can do with it. It would have been a much better outcome had the current council deferred the decision until the new council was in place and perhaps put a recommendation in. That would have made it easier for them. But come what may, as far as I'm concerned, if it gets to the stage that ratepayers are going to be asked to pay for that private hospital, I will be strongly advocating that it's time to sell. This is not necessarily a council issue, but I believe council has a role to play. We need to lobby the state and federal governments, bring the issues surrounding the need for improvements to their attention. They have a lot on their plate. They need local information, and I will be working with the local member and lobbying at that state and federal level to make sure that we get the best possible hospital system here in our area that we can get. First of all, let me say I'm really pleased to hear that there's a free bus service to Towell for people with medical appointments. It's just recently started up. That's a big issue. The transport for particularly elderly patients is very limited. So therefore, yes, I will be trying to bring specialists into the area as well, because that's the next best thing, is to be able to bring those specialists in. I'll be working with local medical centres and practices to make sure that they can access those people and bring them in. We have an ageing population who I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose them. And I know from my own parents' perspective, if either one of them lose their licence, there is no public transport here. For their health, they would have to shift out of the area. We don't want to lose our population. We want to make the services more amenable, and having good health services will also encourage other people, younger families, to move into the area. So it's very important we do whatever we can to bring those specialists to town. This question really tugs at my heartstrings. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about. 9 years ago, I founded an organisation called Boots and Bulldogs, which supports local people living with depression or a mental illness and those at risk of suicide. I did that after a friend suicided, and I found that this area has a very high rate of suicide. We are 9% above the national average, and that's really scary when you think that our support services haven't kept pace with that rise. It's very important that we all understand that mental health affects each one of us. I've been working since April last year with the Minister for Health on bringing a major mental health program to the South Burnett. He has assured me as late January that that project is being considered in the process of the new Mental Health Act. And I believe that result is very imminent because the Act has just been approved. So we'll be seeing some changes happening very quickly. But mental health continues to be a big issue in this area. We need to look after each other and we need to support each other. One of the things that attracted me to the area was the fact that people actually do roll their sleeves up and help each other in times of need. That's fantastic. We need to do everything we can to increase that. Our support agencies that are here in the South Burnett already are really doing a great job with an enormous caseload. Whatever we can do to support them is going to be much needed, much valued. The community groups that are now stepping up are fantastic as well. We've got organisations like the Pantry, like the Wesleyan Church, and there's a range of things, range of options out there. But it's also, mental illness is a hidden illness. And that's why we introduced the Seeds of Hope campaign, to get people to plant a sunflower, to show people who don't feel that they're part of everything, that people do care for them. When they see a sunflower, they know that somebody cares. And I would like to see this region take that project nationwide. Yes, I do believe we do have a cultural issue with alcohol, and particularly with young people participating in risky behaviours. We, as a council, should be always advocating the responsible consumption of alcohol, and perhaps we should be considering that some of our events are alcohol and drug free. There's some of the simple solutions, but leading by example is also another. It's not a good look to have councillors intoxicated at events. Well, leading by example is one of the best options that we've got for any issue. Certainly, I would be advocating in local communities that they don't put their fundraising or revolve all their fundraising around alcohol events. That's You know, if we can develop that culture that alcohol's fine in moderation, then it's a win-win for everybody. I do believe we have a reasonable level of support for domestic violence sufferers, but we could do more. We could do a lot more. For a start, we need to have a safe house for people to go to. But then there's the preventative methods that we need to employ. And how do we go about doing that? We need to educate the community on their role in domestic violence. The fact that it's not okay, the fact that if you see it, you need to step up, those sorts of things. But as well as that, some sort of places where people can go to get more information, to get some support, so that perhaps we can nip this in the bud before it ever becomes domestic violence. How do we go about supporting people when they're going through very stressful times? And that's where the community organisations come in. So I will be promoting good transport links so that we can get people to these sorts of events, to these venues, and also I'll be promoting that community groups need to be considerate of all people in the community, not be discriminatory in any way. Sometimes when somebody comes to them and they are looking a little bit down and out, people take a bit of a step back. We need to actually take a step forward and put our hand out more often. I'll be advocating those sorts of things. There's actually a financial crisis everywhere. We are seeing people struggling, seeing businesses struggling and businesses closing. So councillors need to be mindful of that when they make their budgetary decisions. I really believe that the rates should be fair and affordable, and that our residents now and into the future shouldn't be burdened by massive debts. I can't give specific strategies right now because I don't know the ins and outs of the budget. But I can tell you that I will be looking at it very, very closely, and every decision that I make will be based around fair and equitable, affordable rates. The basis of fiscal responsibility is not spending more than you can afford. Continually increasing debt levels is not the way to go. So we need to look at other options. Perhaps we need to look at a department by department review and see where we can trim spending, where we can increase income and decrease outgoings. Once again, this is a question that I can't specifically answer until such time as I get access to the budget figures and get an understanding of the income and expenditure of the council. This is a rather difficult question because I understand the level of frustration that makes somebody ask a question like this. They feel that things are being hidden. And yes, I do believe that the council needs to be open and transparent, but I also understand that the council budget is very complicated. Opening that to public scrutiny could actually cause more problems than it solves if people misunderstand the way it's written. I do believe that there is a place to be opening the accounts for scrutiny, but whether or not that's the full and complete accounts or whether it's the summary that we see, I'm not too sure at this stage. I'd need to really think long and hard about the ramifications of opening that up. I'm not absolutely opposed to it, but we have to have some sort of a balance when we do something like this. To build trust, there must be transparency. But in saying that, council is a large business, and some of those business transactions are commercial in confidence. So not all things can be open to all people. We need to spend some time working on the trust issues with council. We need to build better relationships with our constituents so that when we say as councillors that's not open to the general public, they understand that it's an issue that is not being hidden from them but is being dealt with in a professional way. I believe as councillors, one of our biggest roles in this coming term is to reconnect with our community and rebuild that trust. so that people do understand the transparency issues surrounding council matters. I understand that residents are anxious to make sure that their rate dollar is being well spent, and I believe that they've always had access to those figures. Fair and fully accountable projects would be the answer to this. I mean, if we can give residents access to information about what money is being spent on what projects, make that available a couple of times a year, I think we can resolve this issue fairly quickly. Prior to actually getting into council and looking at the accounts and doing that department by department review, it's hard for me to answer that question. But I can say, from running a business, from running a household budget, there are always ways that you can trim. We need to have very clear understanding. We need to look at what's a priority, what's that's costing us, are we getting the best value for our dollar? And when we do that, we can make the right decisions. I don't have a specific plan to abolish the road levy, but I am committed to fair and affordable rates. And if I can find a way to get rid of the road levy without negatively impacting on the road maintenance and roadworks schedule, then yes, I will get rid of it, because I want our residents to have fair and affordable rates. I also own a property 9 kilometres from town. It's on a dirt road. That dirt road has not been serviced for 7 years. We have no waste collection, despite the fact that the waste truck turns around in our driveway and it stops collecting only 2 houses from us. So I can understand the frustration that people feel when they don't see something happening in their own area. We need to have a roads maintenance schedule that everybody can access, that everybody can see just when their road is being scheduled. We need to be able to say to people that, yes, your road's going to be done on this particular date. It needs to be more than just town that is worked on. But we also need to remember that there are 3 different types of roads. There are the rural council roads, there are the state roads and the federal roads that are managed by different organisations. We can only address those council roads when we're in council. Cheap, quick fixes don't work, as we saw after the floods of 2011-2013. But sometimes they are quite necessary to keep the road usable until the long-term fix is in place. I don't know that it's council's role to develop these solutions, but certainly we need to invest in the technology that will give us roads that last longer. We need to look at that, though, in the context of a very tight budget. And so there needs to be some sort of a balance happening here. We don't want our rates to go up. We've heard that so often, and I'm very mindful of that in all of those decisions. But we need to be rather creative in how we find solutions to these issues to give us longevity in our road services. Well, the parking problems that I'm aware of are in Nanango, so I'm going to address those. And one of the issues that I see is parking outside of the hardware store and the medical centre. It's quite difficult for people to get a park there and get in and out quite quickly. It's a distance from the covered car park, and for people to walk that distance is, particularly with heavy goods, is really not that acceptable. So we need to look at that parking in that strip there. We also need to consider some disability parking and disability access. We've got a road that is a little bit steep in places. We need to be mindful that we have an older population, we have people with disabilities, and we need to make the parking more suitable for them. There is the covered car park behind IGA, and lots of people are being encouraged to use that and leave the main street parking for short-term visitors. They're probably the main issues that I see in Nanango. In Kingaroy, I would like to think that the parking would be addressed in the streetscape plan. I don't know about that at this stage, but I'll certainly be looking into it and being very mindful about parking problems in towns. It's my understanding that the footpaths belong to council, the footpaths in the residential areas belong to council, but it's up to the resident to maintain them. In the rural area, it's dependent upon whether or not it's a state, federal or council road. But I do believe that it's council that organises the maintenance of them. We need to make sure that those roads are clear. We want tourists to come to the area, and we want people to be safe when they're driving through. Long grass on the side of the road, as it is currently in many places, is dangerous when you've got kangaroos or cows that come out into the road. So I would like to see that as a priority in the maintenance schedule. We need to review that as soon as we get into council and make sure that our roads are safe. I don't have those figures on me at the moment, but I do believe that the total budget's around $6 million, with about 3.2 million of that coming from the road levy. These are questions that only somebody already in council and working in that area would be able to answer. I guess the only thing I can say is that the new incoming councillors will be asking those questions of the manager of the roads portfolio. I don't know the balance of outsourcing. I am aware that a decision was made early into amalgamation to outsource some of the work. The basis of those decisions I'm not aware of, but once again, once we get into council, then we can access that information and start to look at where we can make perhaps better decisions. I couldn't answer that question, I'm sorry. I don't have access to that information at this time. As I've said, I don't at this time understand the processes, so it's very hard to answer that question. But I do want to make sure that there is fair and equitable access to services right across the region. So I will be advocating for that to happen. I believe that we have a fairly reasonable balance of primary and secondary schools, both private and public schools, and they're doing a great job. You just have to look at some of the results of the students. Bringing the CQU to the area is incredibly exciting, because that will give our young people an opportunity to stay in the area to study and not have to move to other places where they then get introduced to other options and, you know, they're eventually drawn out of the area. It will reinvigorate our TAFE. It will provide a small amount of employment, but it will create a university culture which will stimulate business, perhaps things like coffee shops, that sort of stuff will be able to be open, bookshops and so forth. I think it's very exciting. I think the education opportunities in our region are pivotal to our success. If we want to bring other people to the area, if we want to bring young families to the area, we need to have good educational opportunities for them. By introducing an economic driver to each of the major towns, we're increasing employment, we're stimulating the economy, And that in turn then allows businesses to take on young trainees, work experience and apprenticeships. We need to then link that to quality TAFE education and university education options as well. There's a lot of opportunities through online training as well, but we need some mentors out there. Our organisation is actually in the process of doing an education program for young people who are marginalised. So it's not, it really isn't that hard. We just have to get a bit more organised and get other businesses and opportunities happening. I think this is a fantastic idea and a great opportunity for council to lead the way in this area. Certainly I would look at the grants, but I would also be considering what other innovative options that we've got to get these sorts of things funded. We need to look at the cost-benefit analysis of it, but I do believe it's something that council needs to lead by example in. Weed control is a big issue that we need to address and we need to keep on top of. But we need to make sure that it's not just spraying for lantana. There are a number of noxious weeds out there that we need to eradicate. As a council, on council land, we need to be quite diligent about this, and also at the same time making sure that we're not eradicating other species as well. We also need to be promoting to landholders that what they need to do to eradicate these weeds on their land. As far as unused council land, there's a couple of opportunities that immediately spring to mind, such as rainwater harvesting. So by capturing this water that we could then use in the council vehicles that go around the town watering the gardens. It's capturing something that would otherwise just run off. And also perhaps we could consider carbon harvesting, so planting trees on these spaces for the environment. Most certainly there's always room for improvement, and we need to be driving change, not sitting there waiting for change to just happen. We need to look at new and innovative technologies and understand how we can better utilise renewable energies. We should be looking at what's happening in our parks and gardens, for instance, having solar panels on our lights and making the parks brighter. You harness the sun, harness the wind, do whatever we've got to do, but let's look at what new technology is available to make sure that we're at the forefront of it. I believe it's a mistake that was made by our founding fathers in leaving the First Peoples out of the Australian Constitution. I do understand it in time and context, but a mistake nonetheless. And I think it's time that we made that change and really truly showed that we are a united nation, and we showed the importance of the first people in our history. Discrimination of any type is not a positive option. I'm not aware of that clause in particular, so it's something that I will have to look into, but I don't really support discrimination of any type. While I understand the desire for the Indigenous people to have this happen, I'm not fully aware of, and I don't understand at this stage, all of the issues surrounding it. So it's something that I would need to learn more about before I could confidently comment on it. Another learning opportunity for me. Obviously, listening, learning and valuing each other are the basic steps to good partnership. We will be working with the Indigenous people in various projects, ensuring that they are involved in the events and that we are also utilising their expertise in specific areas. Currently, I'm working on a project with Indigenous youth to help them rebuild a future. And this has given me a great insight to some of the issues that these young people are facing. It's given me a fantastic opportunity to learn more about what their lives are like and what their aspirations are. I want to continue building on that learning experience. But I'm certainly keen to also promote the Indigenous culture that's in our area. We have a wealth of history, Indigenous history here, and we'd be foolish not to promote that. Yes, I believe council should be relying more on technology. For instance, we should be opening up an online payment systems for our rates, for our fees, so that people can budget better and just make regular payments through. We should be looking at making a more paperless organisation, although we'll never be fully paperless, I don't believe. But perhaps something like an app that we can use to keep better contact with our residents. Could be in emergencies, and there are some of those sorts of things around now, but we need to be tapping into the technology that our younger people are living and breathing by now. Yes, there is, but I'd also like to make them more personable. We want to build trust, we want to build relationships, we do that, person to person. So, but streamlining, yes, there are processes out there. Businesses all the time use consumer software material to be able to track interactions and to make sure that there is good follow-up. We need to have that sort of stuff. So each of the councillors should be able to then track the meetings that they attend and the outcomes that they need to follow up on and the timelines that go with that. There's a range of interactions that the council workers have with residents. They need to be tracked better so that there is follow-up. If a phone call result is that somebody's going to ring you back on Tuesday, make sure that they ring back on Tuesday. Those simple things. And in our busy world, we need reminders. That's perhaps what the apps can do. That's perhaps what some of the technology can do. Make sure that we're utilising the technology to keep us on track at all times. Council can always lobby and advocate for the best possible data solutions for our community. There are too many places at the moment where the phones drop out, the data drops out. We need to make sure that the powers that be know that we want and deserve and intend to get the best phone and data service available to us. This is what our businesses are going to depend on. This is what our residents need. If we want to encourage more people to the area, we have to have good access to technology and good phone services. We must spend time, put effort into advocating for those to come to our area. No, I don't. In this day and age, it's a great ideal, but I don't see that it's ever going to be 100% for council, because there will be residents who need access to information, who don't have the internet, who don't have the computers, who just want the hard copy in their hand. So whilst I think that we can go a long way toward being paperless, I don't think we'll be totally. I have none. Pure and simple. I have no political affiliations. I am running as an independent. I am very interested in politics, but particularly at the local level, but I have no political affiliations. That's a huge question to try and answer, but I'll give it my best shot. I spent 20 years in education in the community development sector. I looked after 82 schools, and my work in that field was in the field of conflict resolution, training, volunteer management, governance and fraud investigation. I subsequently went on and became the CEO of the National School Canteen Association, where I stayed for some 14 years, I do believe. Now that organisation serviced 9,637, I think it was, schools at the time, school canteens. That's the largest group of small businesses in Australia collectively. And in those roles in particular, I worked often with government. I sat on reference groups, I assisted in reviewing the Health Act. So there's a range of things. I also negotiated with industry to create healthier products for school canteens. So I am used to dealing with people at those levels. I've also, I've had a lot of learning experiences in my life. Most often when I've gone into something, it's with very little experience, but a lot of confidence and a lot of passion and ability to learn. One of those was that I was involved in creating a software program. Now, what I know about technology is that if it's not connected to the wall, it won't work. So that was a bit of a challenge, but here I am today with my name on a patent for some software that was developed for a cashless school canteen card. I've also worked, I've run and owned small businesses myself, and I know how hard it is to run a small business. It's not the easy thing that you may think. It's not, you know, a great lifestyle. You work harder as the owner of a small business than you do when you're being paid to work 40 hours a week. But it's taught me an awful lot. It really has. I've been a journalist, an author, and I've also run a couple of consultancies. Those consultancies have dealt with business management and governance, and that's where I feel really, really comfortable in working with council. Council is a big business, and governance is a major issue in council. So I do feel that I have the background, the experience. I actually feel that everything I've done leading up to this has been directing me here. Obviously, as I've said, I've done an awful lot of work in community, and I passionately believe in the power of the community. We need to harness that. We need to harvest that community gold. And that is something that I'd be working very hard at, because community gold, if I haven't explained it to you before, is all the wonderful experience that people have out there, all the wonderful knowledge that they have, and the ideas. Every single one of us has great ideas. My expertise, I guess, is in getting that out of people and empowering them to drive it forward. So as well as all those other professional experiences, my experience with people is going to be very important. Well, council wages are determined by a tribunal, so I've got no control over that. But so the answer would be no, I'm not going to give myself a pay rise. I believe the starting salary for a councillor is around $65,000, and this is actually less than what I was paid to run the National Canteen Association. I don't believe that council wages are actually in line with private enterprise. But for me, it's not relevant. I'm in this race because I want to do something for my community, not because I'm looking for a paycheck. Yes, we need to be compensated for the work that we do, and it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of hours. But the wage is not that important to me. Being able to do something for my community is why I'm putting my hand up. We hear right across the country that people are feeling disenfranchised, they are disillusioned with politics at all levels, council, state, federal. If there is corruption, if corruption is discovered, I will do my best to eradicate it, to report it, to make sure that the people are brought to attention. But I do believe that this is a two-pronged question. And there's that question about perceived corruption. This gets back to what I was saying before, and there is a lack of trust in council now, that we need to be creating those relationships. We need to be open and accountable. If we do that, if we open everything up, there's no opportunity for corruption. I don't support corruption in any shape or form. I don't support jobs for the boys. I support honesty in all things, and I will lead by example. Well, the first thing is that we need to be aware of the minority groups and aware of their issues, their cultures. And we need to be considerate of those when organising events or, might be meetings, whatever it is. But we just need to be considerate of those particular issues. I need to make sure that council is inclusive and doesn't even inadvertently exclude anybody from something. I don't believe in discrimination, and I do believe that we need to be open and welcoming to all groups, to all cultures, to all people, whether we agree with them or not. We need to listen, we need to learn from them, and we need to value what they have to offer. I'd like to think that council already has processes in place that support the workplace health and safety strategies, but I'd make sure that they are, and that they are happening often enough. So we need to go back and review. Public spaces may start to deteriorate. We need to be on top of that and make sure that all issues are dealt with promptly. In future planning, we need to make sure that the workplace health and safety issues are included in the planning process right from the get-go. And also encourage people to report issues as much as possible, and then make sure that we follow through on them. Education is the key, education. And council has a role in being able to promote regularly through their websites, through maybe phone apps, whatever, the key elements of workplace health and safety that need to be considered, keeping in mind that there are often changes to the legislation, and so people need to be brought up to date with that as well. But council can also be encouraging business and community groups to take on some of these issues themselves, introduce it into their training programs, introduce it into their education programs as well. So it needs to, I guess, become just part of our culture. And dare I say it, the drip method works really, really well. Keep it constant, keep it coming, and people will eventually get it through.